I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us this afternoon for what promises to be a fascinating program. I'm Dina Hirsch, Vice President of the Generations After. It is my distinct honor and personal pleasure to introduce a longtime Generations After member, Mindy Weisel, and her daughter, Ariane Weisel Margalit. And they are joining us from Jerusalem, where they both live. As you read in our newsletter, Mindy was one of the first babies born in the Bergen-Belsen displaced persons camp in January 1947. And in fact, her birthday was just 2 days ago. Her parents both survived Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen. Mindy's newly released memoir, After the Obligation of Beauty, is not, however, a book about the Holocaust per se, but rather her self-appointed mission to find a way to live in the world as it exists after the Holocaust. It is a challenge that our cherished survivors, children of survivors, and our children, individuals who lost other family members in the Shoah, and other individuals who have, for whatever reason, delved into that inexplicable and horrific chapter of history, must grapple with. It is a challenge that our internationally acclaimed artist and author is uniquely positioned to address. There is a quote from Hadassah Lieberman on the screen that appears in the book, and it says, "So much has been written about the darkness and horrors of the Holocaust. As daughters of Holocaust survivors, we were buds growing from the nearly dead branches of our parents. But we are the daughters of the future. We turn to the artistic and the creative expressions of life's beauty in celebrating their survival." And I believe Hadassah is in our Zoom audience, and we welcome her. Today, you will hear how Mindy lives her life in search of and in creating beauty. Following the interview, both Mindy and Ariane will be happy to answer questions. And we ask you to write those questions in the Zoom chat as we go along. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Mindy Weisel and Ariane Weisel Margalit.
Thank you so much, Dina. And thank you to the entire Generations After team. This is really an honor to be here and to be interviewing my mother. I've never interviewed my mother, so this is really quite an experience for me. And thank you so much for giving us this time and for sharing your audience with us and us with your audience.
Thank you. My publicist getting me to speak in the most wonderful places, and I was so excited about this, and especially to Anat Barcone for inviting me and this book to present this book, and then for Dina Hirsch and Rachel and Ruth and the whole team really took over. And Anat, if you're watching, I send you every loving wish and for Shalema and Yasher Koach from Jerusalem. All right, Ariane, and Generations After, the work you're doing is so important, and we'll talk about it more in a while. All right, Ariane, it's yours. Everybody, I'm very happy that my youngest daughter, who's very private, is actually getting to interview me, and I don't have to ask her any questions, because if I asked her, every question would have the same answer. I'm fine. Everything's fine. All right, Ariane.
So, Mom, you've been working on this book for many, many years. I'm not sure how much people know that you've really been working on this for so long, and you've gone through a lot of titles for the book. How did you decide on After and the Obligation of Beauty? Tell me about that selection and what that means.
Well, I started the book in 2009 after I had been with Dad on a trip to Germany. And I was very moved. And then it just, as I was living my life, unlike the way I paint with a certain need, the book just kind of took its time. And I felt I was going to give this book whatever time it needed, Ariane. And how many titles did I call you with? And I was convinced it was going to be Making Marks, about an artist, and it was going to be about a daughter survivor. We went through endless titles and endless revisions. And I really do feel by the time the book got finished 11 years later, it only could have got finished during this period because I had to live through the book. And the title after, it's kind of like when I'm painting, the title comes to me somewhere near 3/4. And because just like in painting, the book gave me an answer to what am I really interested? What am I writing about? Like, what am I even talking about? And then I was able to revise and write the whole book. Once I got the title, I could finish it. After stuck with me because I was raised in a home where everything was about before. In my mother's case, before the war, I should remember everything as the only daughter to this woman who had lost her sisters and her parents and watched their children and all of them be thrown literally into the gas chambers. My mother insisted that I remember the beauty of her life before the war. So she was very much into Mindela, this is how it was in Durheim. This is how it was at home. My father talked about what things were like before our American life in the camps. So everything was about before. And I realized in writing the book that I was interested in after. What happened to all of us, to the survivors, to us? How did we find a life? How did we create a life? And actually, Ariane, for our viewers, I would like them to know that Ariane actually gave me the title, the subtitle, The Obligation of Beauty. On that note, I'd like to read something. This is just 4 lines, but it's just remarkable to me, just absolutely remarkable. We were just in California after not seeing my father for close to 3 years. I had a knee replacement and then it was COVID. And 3 years at this stage in life goes very quickly. We just saw my father in November. Now, my father always thought when I was younger that it was kind of foolish. Monkeys could paint. What are you going to be, an artist? Took a lot of therapy, I can tell you, to just go ahead and paint. So this quote that I'm going to read, and I want to show you this, is particularly moving. I was saying goodbye to my father at his home in LA that he's been living in for the last 55 years. And he says, Mindela, I have an article for you. My husband and I, during COVID, subscribed for my father to get the Jewish press. So he loves to read. So we figured the LA Jewish press. So as we're leaving, he literally with his walker is running out and gives me this quote. Now, don't forget, the subtitle is The Obligation of Beauty, right? My father was so moved by this article. It's about an artist, Baruch Nachshon in Israel, Visions of Light and Color, that they did an article on in the Jewish press. But listen to this. And then when I tell you when it was written and who wrote it, then you'll see why I had to say it. Literature, painting, and sculpture all serve the purpose of giving form to concepts buried deep in the human spirit. For as long as even a single brush and stroke remains hidden in the depths of a thinking and feeling soul and is not shaped and formed, there is an obligation upon us, upon those who create art, to express it. This was written by Rav Kook in 1903. So can you imagine? I just talked to my father today, which is a miracle I'll talk about later. But I told my father this could not have been a better birthday present, getting this quote. So now I want to spend the year reading Rav Kook. And this is kind of how my mind and my life kind of works. I get a name and a title, and it goes to a book, and then it goes to another book, and or another person, or, good question.
So, but back to your book and this book. So I found it very interesting when I was reading the afterword, which is written by Ambassador Stuart Eisenstadt. And he says there that that he doesn't see this book really as a Holocaust book, that this is a book about a way of living, how to live. And that struck me, not because I think of this book necessarily as only a Holocaust book, but it seems so deeply personal, and I know you as my mother, so I knew it sort of as almost like a diary or a chronicling of our home and my, our home life. But to see it as something much more universal about guidance and living on a broader scale, that was new. That was really, really, really special for me to see. Now, would you agree with that? How do you feel about that?
I don't know who I was writing for, Ariane, but something you said really struck me. I was very lonely as a child. Bubby and Zadie worked all the time. They owned a bakery. I was home alone. And I kept journals. My Roz Barrick, my American mother, gave me a journal when I was 13. And when I was about halfway through the book, and I just kept writing slowly, and it changed every year. It just changed, and I let it change. I let it grow. It was kind of like a bread that was going to have its own yeast and its own determination. And when I was putting the book together, I was reading journals from the age of 13 to the now. And I realized that so much of what I've lived and what I feel is universal. Zadie, your grandfather is the one who used to say, Mindel, it's not just us, it's not just the Holocaust. He used to talk about Rwanda. And now he's been lecturing for the last 8 years, I think. I don't really know how many, but at least 8 years at the Simon Wiesenthal Museum of Tolerance. And he just gave a talk December 8th at the age of 96, Kanahar. So I don't know who I was writing for, Ariane. I think I was writing for me. I needed to see what happened to my life, where it was so hard. It was so hard living it. It was so hard becoming a person. It was so hard. On the one hand, it was so hard because you grow up as a survivor's daughter, and this is generations after, and I don't know how many would agree with me, but I can tell you that reading Helen Epstein's Children of the Holocaust had a profound impact on me in the sense that, wow, I'm not the only one who feels this way. But you grow up, and I talk about this in the book, you grow up looking and learning your parents' faces. It's your first language before you learn anything else. And I really do think it takes a lifetime to learn who you are, and a lot of work to learn who you are and not walk around feeling like you're living for somebody else.
Yeah. So who you are is not primarily, but one of the things you are is an artist. So how did you know? When did you know that that was a major part of your identity, that you wanted to be an artist?
Well, I most certainly didn't see art at home. I saw a lot of wonderful European needlepoints. I didn't see art. There were no art books. But I was in New York when I was about 14, and I had a wonderful art teacher. And I just felt like, wow, this was a language I seemed to understand. And I bought these little teeny books. And then I come home, and I'm in LA, and I find this Black notebook, and there's a chapter in the book called My Father's Drawing, which I think answers that question. And we'll go into much further detail. But I think basically my father in Bergen-Belsen in 1946, at the age of 21, goes ahead and he's a yeshiva boy, very Orthodox, poor home, never had an art class in his life. I didn't even realize that he could draw. I don't think he knew he could draw. He said he was so moved by the sun coming up in the barracks in Bergen-Belsen that he did a drawing. And I found this drawing. And when I looked at this drawing, I felt something. I just felt it, like my heart sang. And I thought, wow, look at what a mark. And I think then I started, and my first exhibition that I really saw at the age of 16 in a museum was when I was dating Dad and we went to see a Chaim Soutine show. And then I started to just, one artist led to another artist, but it was Zaidi's drawing that really moved me.
Wow. So now when you're going to your studio and always, what do you do when you see a blank canvas? How do you start a painting?
Well, now it's different because I've said so much, and now we have WhatsApp, so I'm not anxious going. I used to be so anxious just going in there. Could I feel? Will I feel? How do I feel? Do I want to feel? You know, I used to tell, for 10 years, I taught at the Corcoran, part of George Washington University's art department. And I used to tell my students, I always loved teaching beginning painting, and this is at college level. And I'd say, if you don't feel it, nobody is going to feel it. So you can't go in and pretend. So when I'm in the studio, now that I have said so much over 45 years of painting, I'm a little kinder to myself. Maybe I'll collage, maybe I'll just read, maybe, but as soon as I'm there, I get busy. But as you well know, the greatest inspiration now is not so much what I'm experiencing, what I'm feeling, or even what I'm viewing or taking in the wonder of the world. It seems to be music. So you sent me this music last week, Idan Reichel in Buenos Aires. And as you know, I'm very emotional and talkative and everything else, but I don't cry that easily. And most certainly not like I cried last Tuesday. So I respond to the music, and then I paint. And to my amazement, when I'm finished, sometimes I don't even know, like, when did it get painted, who painted it, how did. I have a journal entry, Ariane. I don't know if I ever told you this. I have a journal entry in 1979, and I'm working on the paintings with my father's number, the Holocaust paintings. And I'm saying, I wonder if anyone will feel this. And I wonder, am I feeling it? Like I didn't even know. And then I answered myself in that journal. And I'm so happy that I did. I said, as long as I'm feeling, I will have what to paint. I was worried then, you know, like, will I really be able to feel and paint my whole life? Well, I've gotten to this stage, thank God, and I'm still working.
So I think that we have an image here of of what it looks like when you are just at the beginning of an inspiration.
Okay. Okay.
And this is a quite a large canvas here. This is in your studio in Jerusalem, and your very unique, authentic studio in Jerusalem. What's happening here? What is this? What stage of the process
somebody
are you at here?
I'm so thrilled that I took a picture of this. And I only did it after I read a huge book on Matisse, and he actually took pictures of the layers underneath his painting. This is how I start a painting. I talk about my process in the book. The book is very much about being an artist, why I work, how I work, where I find beauty, how to live, a story from being everything. Well, each chapter kind of tells you what it is, but this is the chapter called Making Marks. And I start each work since 1978, so however many years that is, I start each work by writing. And I write, so this is not scribbling that you're looking at. I am writing and writing and writing, and I turn the canvas over and I turn it sideways, and I'm writing words on top of words, and words are just pouring out of me. I can't write fast enough. And then I start to slow down, and words just lose their meaning, that there's no word that can express what I want to say. And it's very physical, it's very emotional. I get to a point where if you tried to speak to me, with me, or I probably wouldn't speak. And then I start mixing my paints and I make a mark, and one mark leads to another mark, and I'm layering, and I go through days and years. There's a very interesting story in the book. I still find it interesting about a painting that gave me a really difficult time and how I discovered what it was. And it's the chapter called My Mother's Back. I think that's the chapter. Yeah. But so this is what 90% of my work looks like underneath, whether it's glass, whether it's canvas, paper, doesn't matter.
And then what does it look like after?
Then God's tears. Let's see the next painting. So that became the final painting. That painting is in the permanent collection at the Israel Museum. It's about 7 feet high by 6, maybe 5.5 feet, 6 feet wide. And I was doing it after we made Aliyah. And, I'm glad we have an image of this painting, because when people refer to dark work, if you really look at this painting, look at all the light that is coming through it. And this is what amazes me, because I have not a clue how a painting is going to look like till I'm almost done, when I sit in front of it. And I just don't, people ask me all the time, how do you know when it's done? I know it's done when sitting and looking at it, and I don't want to make a mark. And painting is, you keep hoping. I have one journal entry where I wrote, why am I in such a hurry to finish a painting? As soon as I finish it, I have to go start another one. But this one, I had a little bit of a hard time. Like I would say, oh, I'm so glad it's done. It's so glad it's done. I'd get back to the studio. I wouldn't like the way it dried, or there wasn't enough light or a color or whatever. And then when it was finished, it was really finished. But it was pouring. We had made Aliyah in September, and I did this painting in the fall, and around my birthday time, January. And again, I was crying. Maybe it's, I don't know. My mother died in January. Maybe that has something to do with it. So I felt like between the rain, God giving Jerusalem rain, which we all need all the time, Israel, and a lot of times I cry. I just realized I'm really happy. I think I was actually very happy doing this painting. So it's not, I think this painting is a lot about gratitude. I did make Aliyah, thankfully.
So, and this is darker, but we have a lighter painting.
Yeah, well, let's go to the next one. The next painting is called Breath. And this is owned by dear friends of mine. It was a wedding gift from their mother, Maxine Isaacs Alfred and Emily Johnson in Washington, D.C. And it's a huge oil on canvas, and it's layers of joy. I was just so happy. I was really so happy. And sometimes I let a lot of the writing show. And you can see here some of the letters. It's never scribbling, never. It's really has content. There's a lot of content. And I can't figure it out either, except that it's clearly sky and sun and flowers. I remember once, because since this is a mother-daughter conversation, Ariane, do you remember, I think I wrote about this in the book. Do you remember? Yeah, I did. Do you remember I once called you on the way to the studio in Baca? And it was the most gorgeous day, and I'm looking at Bougainvillea, and I call you, and I asked you if I was alive.
You're alive, yeah.
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 Really,
I was pretty concerned, but yeah. It's okay. A long time has passed.
You should have been concerned. I was like, really, am I alive? This beauty is beyond breathtaking. Maybe this is, paradise. Maybe this, and believe me, Israel is not paradise. And this was 10 years ago, and I still love it. But I don't pinch myself, am I alive anymore? But I did call Ariane and talked about this out-of-body experience. All right, let's see the next painting. I'm curious what we selected for the next painting. Oh, and this, let's go back to that painting for 1 minute if we can, Ephraim, please. This painting, I was taking Ulpan and learning Hebrew, and this painting was done to Idan Reichel, very joyful Israeli music. Okay, next. Okay, this painting, I think it's called Longing. So I think we selected this painting because I really would like to show that when I was studying painting, Hans Hofmann, an artist and teacher in the 40s in Germany, actually had a great influence on my life, as did Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. Basically, that an artist, and I think maybe survivors' daughters, need to live like this anyway. I don't think you need to be an artist. I think just as a way of life, it's good not to have a memory and not think, how did I feel yesterday? What did I do yesterday? What was yesterday? And especially with art, what did I paint yesterday? I don't want to know what I painted yesterday. I want to learn to be in the present. And that translates into every day of my life. I want to be present whether I'm painting. I want to be in the present whether I'm putting flowers in a vase, whether I'm talking to a grandchild, whether I really believe the necessity of working on learning to be in the present. And I think survivors, children, I mean, this is for generations after, and my entire generation has had to struggle with carrying a very big backpack full of memories, stories, things that were told, weren't told. Okay, so then what wasn't told? That became a big issue also. And in this particular painting, I was full of a longing for the family that I never had. So I go, like Breath, that other painting was very now, this was very then. There's a lot of back and forth. It's called being alive. Next painting. All right, this is the last painting I believe we're showing today, and I really would like to tell this story. I just breathed out this painting, and it's very poignant now, but I won't go into it. I'll talk about it later if there's an opportunity. My father and mother were always very independent. They owned a bakery. They worked 16 hours a day. They never complained. They rested on Shabbat. They were Shomer Shabbat. And my mother always wore blue. So every painting has cobalt blue in it. And I think the reason for the blue is when she came to America, her aunt, my grandmother's sister was already in America, gave her a blue dress. And in the book, there's a picture of my mother in a blue dress and Lily in blue and why I use blue. Okay, how did this painting happen? My father never, ever wants to bother me. He lives in LA. I lived in Washington for 44 years. I live in Israel for the last 10 years. Mindela, don't come. When my father gets the flu and he says, Mindela, come. So I got nervous. I take a United Airlines, the red eye. I get to LA, I go right to the hospital. It's 6 a.m. I go into the hospital room and his room is dark and I'm worried I'll wake him. So I go sit on the chair and I meditate every morning. So I figured, okay, I'll meditate. And when Tati wakes up, when my father wakes up, I'll talk to him. I'm sitting quietly in the chair and all of a sudden I hear my father, who davens every morning and puts tefillin on every morning, talk about faith and believing. So he starts davening. He starts the morning shachrit in his bed, in the dark room, on his back, not knowing I'm there. So I decide I'll close my eyes and to continue meditating while he's davening. Finishes davening, and by then it's around 7, and he gets up. And I don't want him to be alarmed. So I say gently, Tati, I'm here. And that started our visit. I get back to the studio and out, like without any idea, I write what happened. And then I take a watercolor and this blue flower. And when you look at the picture of my mother in the blue dress in the book, and you see this blue flower, you realize that I was really needing my mother in that room. And so every painting has a story. Every painting I could spend the rest of my years. Maybe I'll do that, Ariane. Tell the story.
Yeah,
I'm not writing any more books.
But I want to ask you, because when we were growing up, when I was growing up, I'm the youngest of 3 daughters, and when we were growing up, Mom, we heard about the Holocaust primarily from Zaidi, from your father. Your mother never spoke about it, ever, never, as you said. But what we heard from you was always through your paintings, through your experience. There was never history lessons. There were never, documentary viewing nights. But what did you want us to know about the Holocaust? And were there things you kept from us? Was there intentionality about it? Was it just you were feeling what felt right? Did you discuss it, with your parents about how to communicate this to the 3rd generation?
Ariane, nobody has ever asked me that question. Nobody. I think it is such a good question, such a smart cookie. It's a really good question. Just the opposite, Ariane. I think because everything was such a secret in my house and everything was so hidden, and I was always so anxious because I didn't know what was true, what wasn't true, what was real, what wasn't real. Did it happen? Didn't it happen? I mean, they didn't want me to worry, not realizing that all I did was worry because I didn't know what was going on. So I was always, first of all, by nature, I think I'm very open, but it wasn't a conscious. I wanted all my children not to worry about their parents. I didn't want my children to worry about their parents. And I wanted my children to believe in beauty more than anything. And before Bubby died, she said, "Don't let it die with you." And I knew the it was not only a Jewish life and a Jewish identity, but it was really also her amazing love of beauty and sustained her. Even while Bubby was dying, there were fresh roses from her rose trees in the front garden in LA. She had the white shoulders perfume, there. She was still flirting with the doctor 2 weeks before she died. She was just, I don't know, I wasn't conscious. No, I wasn't conscious. And listen, you had 2 grandparents. You had grandparents who were Holocaust survivors. And even on Dad's side, Dad's father left Europe in 1939, and you had an American grandmother, which felt miraculous to me that my daughters had grandparents. But I think you just heard all about it. Somebody asked me recently when I learned about the Holocaust. I don't even know. I haven't a clue. I think in 1979, when I started, there's a picture of Bubby, and that was my mother. See, you never know. My mother was always working in the bakery, really wouldn't take time. And then I said, "That's it, Mommy, we're going on a trip." My oldest daughter, Carolyn, was studying in Italy. And I said to my mother, "We're going on a trip." And we went to Venice, and my mother actually was very sick. And this was a picture of us leaving. And we left all the way to Venice. And then on the way back, my mother was not well, and she was gone not even 6 months later. So that's the last picture of Bubby. Yes, somebody asked if the painting behind Ariane is mine. It was Ariane's wedding gift. It's the Moroccan wedding. She married into a wonderful Moroccan family. And they had a Moroccan wedding in Jerusalem. This is my very avant-garde daughter in a Moroccan restaurant called Darna.
Which unfortunately no longer exists.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I want to go back to something you said, because you said that you didn't know what was true and what wasn't true. what do you mean? What was it? What was that? How does that connect to the Holocaust? How does that connect to your parents and what they were experiencing themselves? Tell me about
What
that.
do I mean by that, true or not true? That's really a good question. I think I believe in the truth, and I believe what my father was saying, and I believed what my mother was saying. It's not that I didn't believe them, but I think they always wanted to spare me, or they were overprotective, or there were things that so clearly weren't true, or they were exaggerated, or, and I do something, with the same intensity that my mother does. My mother would say, "Oh, it's so gorgeous," and it used to drive me crazy. And now I do it with that intensity. I don't know. I don't know, Ariane. I don't know. There just felt like there was a lot that I was shielded from, which didn't do me any good. And I haven't really discussed that part. When I talk with other survivors' daughters, it's usually questions like, did your parents talk about it? Did they not talk about it? My question is always, were you anxious? Because I was just so anxious all the time. The knock on the door, in a normal home, Ariane, you grew up in a home, the doorbell knocks, you go answer the door. In my home, the doorbell rang and my mother would go, so if you grow up from 3 years old with that, like terror. And then in the book, I talk about the fire that Bubby was in and true trauma. I've had my own firsthand trauma. But I've overcome it. I believe you can really overcome. I really believe you can overcome with work and time and finding meaning and beauty.
Do you think that your parents have that Bubby before she died and that Zaidi now, that they have overcome the fear, that do you think that Bubby grew less anxious, that the stability of her life helped her? Because you did have a very stable life in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I know. That's also a good question. I think it reminds me of Dr. Mendel. I had a wonderful doctor in Washington, D.C., Burl Mendel, and I went to him starting at 27. I mean, I've had several nervous breakdowns and really just I think for me, it wasn't so much psychiatric, it turns out. It turns out I had a central nervous system that was so sensitive, but also it was never knowing when to stop. I was never doing enough. If you have parents who are working 16 hours a day and they never sit down, and my mother didn't go for lunch with a friend. I mean, the big outing with my mother was to go for ice cream, a movie, or shopping, once in a while. So you don't know how to live. You really don't. And you just work, and it's never enough. So I wanted to be an artist and a mother and a wife, and got married at 18, and it was never, and a good cook. And the only thing I was spared, I didn't have to become a good baker because I was a baker. So you have to worry about baking. Okay. And we used to eat all the broken cakes that he brought home. So we had fun. But I asked Dr. Mendel on a very serious note, when my doctor, I said, how do you live a life? And he said, you hope at the end, and this answer will answer your question about Bubby and Zaidi about, I asked, how do you live a life? And he said, you hope at the end of your life, you've had more good days and bad days. So when Bubby died, and I was grieving, and I went to Dr. Mendel and I said, my mother died and I can't bear it. And she had such a hard life. And Dr. Mendel said to me, even with her year in Auschwitz, I promise you, Mindy, she had more good days than bad days. So I live with that. I live with that and look at Zaidi, I mean, I think they worked hard on living. They wanted to live well. They wanted to be their children, my brother and I, to be educated. They wanted my brother and I to have experiences, and they wanted us to live.
Now,
They just didn't want me to drown in the pool, so I never learned how to swim.
right, that makes
Or
sense.
fall off the horse. It's
Right.
amazing. I got a bike, Ariane, and I had roller skates. But if I fell, you should know. I don't know if I ever told you this. I once fell in Brooklyn with the roller skates, and my mother gave me such a zets. Like, instead of what would I do to you, I'd say, "Oh, Ariane, I'm so sorry you fell. Let's clean you up, give you a hug," right? My mother would say, "Mindela, how could you fall? Like, how could you do that to yourself?" Okay, so there's so much that's not in any way normal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If there is a normal.
No. Thank God there's no normal. But normal isn't a word you use often. You also don't use the word
Never.
happy often. I think you use fulfilled. What's your aversion to this word happy?
I have a tremendous aversion. I can't stand the word happy because it's like the word nice. I mean, first of all, what does nice say? It says nothing. And happy. Who is happy all the time? Who? Have you ever met anybody who's happy all the time? And it's an empty word. It's so fleeting. And I really believe in words like fulfillment. Are you fulfilled? Are you fulfilling your day? Are you fulfilling your life? Did you have an interesting day? Did you have a meaningful day? I would never ask my children, "So, were you happy today at school? Are you happy?" Or, and I also believed in other things. I really believed in language. Like, if I fought with my children, and I was a screamer mother and very European raised, and if I had a fight, what did you three girls find at your door the next day? I would write a letter. You all have boxes of letters, trying to explain myself. And I did the same thing with my parents. If I aggravated my parents, oh my God, I immediately wrote a letter. So I guess I was always writing also. The need to express.
So is after a letter to anybody?
What a good question. I think after is a love letter to life. I really do. I think there were 2 times in my life I had to really consciously choose life. And I believe in living. Is it easy? No. Is it fun? Yeah. Can you make it interesting? I have a friend in New York, Maxine, if you're there, it's you, who says she wakes up happy thinking, what is going to be interesting about her day? And I have learned. I learned from all my friends, all you friends who are watching, all family, all friends. Every single one of you has been a teacher, and you all know who you are. And my children have learned from all of you. Oh, those are my 3 girls. Carolyn, the oldest, Ariane, my baby, and Jessica in Florida. God bless my 3 girls, which is very strange. I always wanted 3 girls because when we came to America, we lived with my tante Suri, my grandmother's mother that I mentioned. She had 3 daughters, and I have a picture of them. I show my girls. One looked like Carolyn, one like Ariane, and one like Jessica.
So I want to ask you one last question though, because I think that it's not an obvious track to become an artist, having your parents and especially your need to please them. It wasn't a usual thing. It wasn't something that they could immediately understand. How were you so brave to do it, and what did they think?
Oh, I love that you think I'm brave.
What was the reaction?
Brave.
I mean, these survivor parents having an abstract expressionist artist daughter, it's, what did they think of this business?
Well, I think Zaidi's still trying to find an apple in one of my paintings to recognize, and I don't think it was an accident that the very first series I did was with Zaidi's number. I was very fortunate. First of all, I met your father very young, and he believed in art, and he brought me The New Yorker and Rachmaninoff music and took me to foreign films, and he opened my eyes to a lot of an American, open, educated way of life. But also when I told Bubby that I wanted to paint, and I was learning watercolors. Carolyn was just born and I went studying at Venice Beach once a week. I mean, I always was trying to balance it. You know, I feel very blessed in a way. I don't know a lot of artists who have children and homes, and I really don't. You have to be a little nuts, Ariana. You have to have an extra energy. And also I started to say, that's what I started to say before, that when Elie Wiesel used to be asked at Boston University by students, do you think I can write? And Elie used to say, if you can help it, don't. You know, I don't think I could help it. I think I was very, very fortunate that I had a high school teacher who believed in me, dad who believed in me, a doctor who believed in me. I became an artist in his office from the age of 27 in his office. And reading, getting books, Heschel, God in Search of Man taught me about being an artist. I think the reading from so young, when I was 6 years old, I already had a library card. There was nobody home. What do you do? My brother wasn't even born till I was 6 years old. So you read, really. And I hear a lot of survivors' children read a lot. Not as a generalization, but.
No, I think your art, there's a whole, aspect of your art that it's connected you to Germany, which is, fascinating. We're not going to go into here because we're out of time, but it's been very redemptive in a way, this connection. Did you want to close with something about this?
Yes, I would like to. Well, first of all, in the book, Ariana's right. There's a lot about being welcomed by the mayor of Dachau and the presence of absence and being a cultural ambassador, emissary for a bit in Germany. But one of the greatest moments of my life was, and there's an excerpt of this in the book, and I would like to close with this book. I had a very crazy recent experience. I was presented with the Order of Merit, which I didn't even know existed.
The German Order of Merit.
The German Order of Merit, a presidential medal from the president of Germany for Tikkun Olam, for my belief in repairing. And I do believe in repairing. So that isn't in the book, but what leads to that is in the book. And then right before COVID started, I got an invitation from Oxford University, thanks to Ellen Berry, to Oxford University to be a speaker at the 75th International Holocaust Remembrance Day in Europe. And I realized that the British had liberated Bergen-Belsen, so it was particularly meaningful to me. And we went to Oxford, and we spent 5 days there. And in my talk, there's just on page 117, I'd like to close with just a teeny excerpt of my talk there, because this is really, I think, the book. My belief in moving forward with love is unshakable. Despite all the atrocities committed by the Nazis, atrocities that impacted my life profoundly, I simply do not believe in hate. I don't. I just don't think it gets anybody. It doesn't serve a purpose. As much as I was raised with a great sadness, a defenseless sadness that is a permanent stain on my heart that will never go away, I believe the only antidote to hate is in expressing love for mankind. I believe in kindness and in creating beauty. We must not stand by passively, especially not during this time in our lives. We cannot allow hatred to undermine the love we need if we are to live in a civilized world. We must, of course, resist those people who believe that our differences give them license to lash out. We must not forget the essential message now, as always. Only love and a passionate move towards action for the good can enrich our world. So that was a little excerpt from,
Amen.
and I should note that the dinner at Oxford was sponsored by the Ryman family, a very long generation of German family where there was a Nazi movement. So, and they sponsored,
That's a whole
that's a whole other
Zoom.
a whole other book.
Not
Yeah.
for us to talk about.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ariane.
Well, thank you, Mom. This was really, really, I'm always so excited to learn more about you and about the world and about our history, which it's really moving to me to know that the people on this Zoom share a lot of what I've gone through and what you've gone through. That's really special. I don't think I've had that kind of experience. Definitely not with you. So thank you for writing this book. Thank you for putting it out into the world, and it's wonderful. And thank you to the Generations After.
And I would like to really thank my 3 daughters who are my army. Really, you know what I am like when I am really feeling alone, and you get it. And I thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Generations After. What a gift to be able to speak with you, to people I know from what I speak, and to those who have questions about being raised in really a very damaged world after the war.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon. That was just heart-wrenching. My name's Rachel Miller, and I am fortunate to be a member of Generations After Programming Committee, as well as the writing group. Please continue writing your questions for Mindy. We have a lot of questions. I know we're not going to get to them all, and I'm going to cheat and ask the first one. I would love to know more about the painting right behind you, Mindy. We could start with that, and then I'll take other people's questions.
The painting behind me starts over there.
It's huge. It's a whole wall.
Way over there. It's
Got your hand. Okay.
Okay, we got you.
Just tell us a little bit about it.
The painting behind, in 1979, I really don't like to call it Holocaust paintings. It's just something I called my father just about every day and would say, Tati, tell me a story. And I had my first studio in Washington, D.C. And I felt a responsibility. I was going to start paying rent, and I really meant it. And I had to prove that I meant it, and I was going to work. And all I wanted to do was write my father's number. It's not even like I was thinking about what am I going to paint? What am I going to do? And I wrote my father's number and something like 100 paintings. And then I ended up with an exhibition in Washington, D.C. And then Susan Goodman, the wonderful curator at the Jewish Museum in New York, really discovered me in 1981, put me in an exhibition there. And then, it starts. What I learned, what I would like to say, what I learned, and I don't talk about this in the book, in 1978, 79, when I was doing this work, there weren't the museums, there weren't the Holocaust books, there weren't Schindler's List and the movies, and there wasn't talk about the Holocaust the way there is now. That's where I wonder where I got the courage. I mean, I don't even think it took courage. I think it's just what I have to do. I have to make these paintings. And the only thing, I always say this to students and anybody who ever compliments a painting, and then I'll tell you where this painting came from, but it really ties into this very essentially. The only credit I think an artist can take for doing their work is to being open to it, to showing up, and to be willing to fail. And I'm willing to risk every painting. So the paintings in 1979 did turn out, they were beautiful paintings like the one behind me, and I was willing to blacken them out. They just felt too colorful because at that time I wasn't dealing with I was dealing with stories from the past, and my father's number would survive, or light would survive in little patches. So that became my first serious series. And what it taught me is that as long as I paint what I feel, I'll be okay, because it most certainly wasn't anything that somebody who wanted to become, I always wanted to be famous. So when somebody wanted to be respected or admired or known in the art world, I didn't think about it. I just did what I needed to do. So I finished this very long, cold year of doing the paintings with my father's number. And I got very sick. I was sick for about 3 months. I still don't realize what things take out of me. And then when I went back to studio, I started a series called Lily in Blue. And this painting is called The Shensta. And the Holocaust series in this series as well was exhibited at the Jack Rasmussen Gallery. And when Jack had the gallery, is now the director of the Museum at American University. But remember, this young kid, it's a lesson really to everybody, he was 28 years old, and he looks at these dark paintings and he says, well, I don't know if anybody's going to buy them, but I'm going to show them. And all along, I just keep going, just like I showed you before. The paintings that everybody saw before were current, and they went from dark to light to dark to light. Now I'm collaging. I seem to be needing to repair things.
Okay, thank you. That was an incredible insight. Thank you so much. I want to move on because we do have so many questions. Dina Reutman asks, what questions have you never asked but wish you had or could? I guess that's referring to your parents. What questions?
I never had to ask. My father offered all the time.
Uh-huh.
So it was too much, really. But now he talks at the Museum of Tolerance. So yes, he's still.
Yeah. The next
I really haven't had to ask. I think the one thing I was afraid to ask, is how my mother survived Auschwitz. And I didn't really learn how she survived till after she died, and I was sitting Shiva for her. And I talk about that in the book, how I learned how my mother survived.
So
that
if
I was afraid.
the next question is related. It's if your father spoke about the Holocaust all the time and your mother didn't, would she leave the room when he started talking?
No, it was just like kind of Shabbat dinner or Passover, Pesach. American women like Passover. I just have such a hard time with it because both my parents were taken from their Seder table.
Ooh.
My mother in Hungary and my father in Sighet. My father wasn't from the Seder, but during Pesach, April 44. But my mother was with her family, taken them.
So that was from Malka Margulies. From Beth Seidel. Surviving has so many meanings. You helped me during a hard time decades ago. Do you believe that survivors have a sixth sense for one another?
Hi, Beth, darling.
Mindy. Hi, Mindy. This is what
Hi,
you gave me.
sweetheart.
Do you remember this?
I can't see it. I don't know how.
It's a collage that you gave me. It says, "It's okay, kid." And
Yes,
this still hangs in my home.
Oh, that's from my doctor's last words to me, were Dr. Mendel's last words before he died was, "It's okay, kid."
Well, I always thought that was the most important message to give. I give that to my son.
Oh,
so.
Here you are. Oh my God, it's such a gorgeous work. And look at you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad I give away good work. I'm not embarrassed years later. No, I think survivor kids have to be vigilant. I think you are vigilant. I think you don't want to aggravate firstborn anyway. I can only speak for my generation. I mean, younger people might feel differently. I felt a tremendous obligation to just be good. And on that note, I was consciously aware of everybody's face, everybody's expression, everybody. To this day, if somebody lifts an eyebrow, I know they're bored, time to move on. So.
Okay, Rosselli Shoshana, I hope I've said that right. What language did your parents used to speak to each other? And what was your first language?
Yiddish.
And at
Yeah.
what age did you learn to speak English?
My first language was Yiddish and probably some German, but my mother only spoke Hungarian, but my father really didn't like the Hungarian language. So they used to talk Hungarian when they wanted to, he knew it, but he wouldn't speak it. And he and my mother would talk Hungarian, so I learned, some secrets that way. But it really Yiddish. I grew up in a Yiddish speaking home, and I'm very fluent in Yiddish. I love it, and I love the opportunity to speak Yiddish.
So Susan's wondering when you learned to speak English.
I learned to speak English probably when we got to, this was I can see this like it was yesterday. We came to America through the Joint and the Highest, and we went to, I was taken to an international children's nursery school on the Lower East Side, and there were kids speaking all kinds of languages, and we were all learning English together. So probably when I was about 3 or 4, and then I had my first cousins. We started all learning English together, and we would practice. And
okay, Stephen Haas. He says, so many times words are so hollow, even in literature, but the visual beauty and truth expressed through your art communicates where words fail. Nonetheless, I marvel at how you, the artist, can communicate through words too. How do you feel about this?
maybe at 40 years of therapy, you have to sit and talk. You have to mind yourself. You have to be very honest. You have to be very open. No, but I think I was, my first memory of writing. Thank you for your kindness in those remarks. But my very first memory is my father in the Lower East Side. We moved to Brooklyn when I was about 7 or 8. And my father would make Havdalah. And when Shabbat was over, he would light a candle and he would say the blessings for Shabbat ending. And he would take the candle and dip it in the Yiddish newspaper in the wine. And then he would give me the rest of the newspaper. And because Shabbat was over, I was allowed to write. And I remember practicing, this ties in with learning English, practicing A's over, I can see it like yesterday at the kitchen table in Borough Park, doing the A's, writing, and loving the feeling of writing. I like making a mark. I also like doing anything where I feel like I'm changing something. I think the best definition I ever heard of art is taking something ordinary and turning it into something extraordinary. That's where the gift comes in. It's all a gift.
You definitely have a gift, a few gifts. I think we'll learn today. And we have a lot of thank yous. I have a few more questions for you, but I just wanted to stop and tell you how many people have commented to thank you.
Oh, I'm so grateful to everybody.
So question from Liz Rees. You are so brave to have entered the endless darkness of the Holocaust and found a way to make beauty from such suffering. Do you have any favorite memoirs from the Holocaust or from second-generation children?
Well, I love Helen Epstein's writing, and I love Primo Levi. I love his book, Moments of Reprieve. That really meant a lot to me. I loved Art Spiegelman's Mouse. I don't read, my friends and family know I'm not a big Holocaust book reader. I'd have to say the first book I read about the Holocaust was Elie Wiesel's Night. And my father, by the way, who last year at the age of 95 tells me he ordered Man's Search for Meaning. That book was a life-changing book. Viktor Frankl's book. I read it when I was 16, Man's Search for Meaning. And then my father tells me that in reality, the only book that really got it completely right was Elie Wiesel's Night. But I love Primo Levi's writing.
Okay. So Joseph Brodecki,
Hi,
How-
Joe.
He's asking how you like living in Israel.
I personally love it. I feel at home. I just feel at home. There's nothing rational about living here. You have to love it. My friend Darcy Stern, when I said, sounded like the Rabbanim, you know, the rabbis who, when you want to convert, they say, they give you everything that's hard about it. She would tell me everything that's hard about it. And I say, that's okay, I'm coming. That's okay, I'm coming. I just happen to feel the beauty of everything. I mean, you can look at it and see the problems of the world, like we see the problems of the world everywhere, but I just find incredible beauty. Period.
Okay.
I look for beauty.
So that may be something we've learned from you today, is how to look for beauty. I do have a question for Ariane.
Yes.
Could you tell us what it's like having a mother who's an artist, who's such a well-known artist as well?
I think, well, there's the answer to the question of having a mother who is an artist, which is very exciting and inspiring, and art was always part of our life. Museums were part of our life. I think that's one answer. I think that there's another answer to the question, which is, what is it like having my mother, who is the artist that she is, as my mother? And that's a whole other thing to answer. But I think that I'm very, very, very blessed. I over time, I've come to understand that the place of emotion and of truth, how my mother was saying, in our household, I didn't know that was rare, because it was so natural in our home. I learned later when I left the house that having beauty and the emphasis on truth through beauty, emotion, speaking what you need to say, not fearing what the truth means, fearing the fear is what happens when you don't speak the truth. That is all wrapped up in my mom's art and my mother being an artist. So that for me is a huge blessing and a huge gift. And being the youngest also affects this, because when I was born, my mother already had her art career. She was already exhibiting in museums. So I think that there was a lot of struggle, a lot of uncertainty with my mother in her career before I was born. And then I was born into a certain sense of, you know, this is an artist who is working hard, exhibiting, receiving recognition. And so that was very powerful and fantastic to see. I always, you know, I being at the gallery openings was a major part of our life growing up, even in Washington, D.C., which isn't the most art-centric town, but for us it was, and it was beautiful. So I think there's a lot of ways that it has affected me, and I get to live with very beautiful art.
But she's a minimalist. You know, she has.
That's it.
Not really.
So how has it affected your career? Because your career is pretty artistic too.
Well, my mother really did not want any of us to be artists. I think, you know, very similar to the way that, you know, the Elie Wiesel quote, if you can help it, don't write. You know, my mother, this was a struggle. I mean, every painting is a struggle. I think that, I'm not sure how much that comes through, but it's, you know, the crying is crying, and the struggle is real. So I don't think as a protective mother, she didn't want that for us. And we weren't specifically taken to art classes as children, and we could play around in my mother's studio, but we never, there was never the emphasis. And I think that the other part of my mother's story has affected me much more, this search for identity after trauma, not my trauma, but our collective trauma. And that's something that's really affected how I've looked at what I want to do with my energy. Yeah.
Well, and I just have to really add that you have done 2 very meaningful documentaries, and you didn't end up in film, but that's how you thought you would be, and you've accomplished that. And I encourage you all to look up Ariane Weisel Marguerite, and you'll see the documentaries she did. They're very powerful.
Okay.
Thank you, Ariane.
Okay, I think we have just want to tell you again that if you look at the chats, you'll see all the beautiful words, people expressing
How do you
bravo,
look at the chats?
brava Mindy, brava Mindy, brava Mindy. But I want to add brava. I know
Ariane.
Yeah.
it can't be easy to ask your mom questions in front of 120 people. So I thank you. Let me just finish up our program. If you would just hang in with me a minute. I want to thank you, Mindy and Ariane, for this beautiful and moving program. How absolutely wonderful to learn about a second generation mother through her daughter's eyes. Thank you both again. I know I look forward to reading your new book, Mindy.
Thank you.
Also to, thanks.
I would just like to show the book because I haven't done that. And then here's after, blue for my mother, in memory of my mother.
That's beautiful.
After, the obligation of beauty, and they left out a memoir. So I have to have another printing. Everybody get the book. And if you get it on Amazon, please support your local independent bookstores. But if you do get it on Amazon, write a review.
Okay. Okay. Thanks also to the program committee for all your work in creating.
Yes,
this
thank
program.
you.
Thank you. And thank you, Brian.
And to Ephraim Katsir for his outstanding technical assistance.
Yes,
Finally-
Ephraim, thank you.
Finally, we extend our sincere appreciation to each of you for joining us today. After the program, you're going to receive a feedback survey by email, which we hope you will complete to help us plan for future meetings, events. And if you enjoyed our program today or any of our previous programs and are not a member of the Generation After program, we invite you to join us. We thank those members who've paid their 2021 to 2022 dues. And if you have not yet, please do so on our website, www.genafterdc.com. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and please be sure to join us for future programs. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Mindy. Thank you, Ariane. All of you for making this day so special.
Thank you so much,
much.
Rachel. And thank you, Dina. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dina. Thank you,
for all for
Rachel,
attending.
everybody. Ephraim, thank you. Thank you, Dina. You've been a joy to work with, really, just a joy. Find something else we can do together. It's just too much fun. I'm going to miss your emails.
I'll email you once in a while, I promise.
Email me once in a while and just stay well.
And you as well.
Too.
Okay.
Goodbye, everybody. And thank
Goodbye.
you so very much.
Stay well.
It was
Bye.
a joy.